I saw that they were suffering from the curse of knowledge. And your listeners have probably heard this before, the curse of knowledge, where you're so close to what you do, you know it so well that it becomes this double-edged sword where you have a really hard time seeing it with a fresh perspective. And that wreaks havoc in many different places, but especially in marketing.
Today, I'm excited to be joined by Billy Bross. If you don't know who Billy is, he is a marketing strategist and educator who helps small businesses create simple but powerful messages. He's also the author of Simple Marketing for Smart People, the one question you need to win customers without gimmicks, hype, or hard selling. And he's the creator of the 5 Light Bulbs framework, allowing businesses to create compelling content. Billy, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Hey, Michael, doing great. Thanks for having me.
Super excited to have you here today. Billy and I are going to explore how people's beliefs impact the buyer journey. Now, before we go down that trail, I would love to hear a little bit of your backstory. How'd you get into marketing? Start wherever you want to start.
All right. So I had to learn marketing to, of all things, learn how to sell beer brewing classes online. And so I previously had little to no experience with marketing. I had a very formal education. I was working in the energy industry, so wind power, solar power, things like that. But like I'm sure a lot of your listeners, I had that entrepreneurial itch. And so after about 6 or 7 years with that job, I said, okay, it's time to do my own thing. And fortunately, I had started on the side this little website around a passion of mine, which was home beer brewing. This is around the craft beer craze of 2007, 2008. Everything was taken off here in the States. And so, I found it very difficult to make that transition into doing that. And despite I had a business background, I had an MBA, but what I learned in school there really didn't prepare me for selling these $47, they're pretty cheap, Michael, $47 online courses. But still, despite being this low price, nobody was buying. And so that's when I had to really dive into this thing called marketing.
So what did you do? I mean, and you said this is around 2008. Is that what I heard you say? Something along those lines?
Correct. Yeah.
So what'd you do? How'd you discover marketing after that? Your courses on brewing wasn't moving.
Well, I started researching. I started Googling, and as I've told you, your site played a big role in this. I realized I didn't know what I didn't know, so I started learning all things online marketing. So your site was a big help. I learned a lot of copywriting. That was the thing for me. Copywriting was the thing out of everything that I learned, because as you know, there's a lot in marketing. It's very broad. Today, I consider myself a T-shaped marketer where I have this broad set of skills, but the copywriting side of things, and even deeper than that, we'll get more into this, the messaging side of things, that was the big needle mover for me. And I realized I could fiddle around and play with all these shiny objects, WordPress plugins and things like that. Hop on all the latest social media apps. But if I just rewrote a headline on a landing page, I could double my conversions. And that was a big aha for me. And then that told me, okay, you need to do a deep dive on this messaging thing.
So ultimately, you wrote a book. When did that book come out?
The book came out in early June.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about the journey from learning and dabbling with copywriting to ultimately writing a book.
Yeah, so I eventually moved on from the beer website. So I was able to get that income up that I could leave that full-time job. That was awesome. That was a life-changing moment. Ran that beer site for a number of years, but really got more into this marketing side than the beer stuff I was doing. So I was able to sell that website and became this behind-the-scenes mind for these front-facing entrepreneurs, other people selling online courses, coaching programs, things like that. And these are very smart people, very high IQ people, but not professional marketers. They are not, and often turned off by sales. And they see a lot of the gimmicks out there, a lot of the hype, a lot of the BS, frankly. And I could see that what they were doing was really powerful, and they were getting big results for their customers and clients. But I saw that they were suffering from the curse of knowledge. And your listeners have probably heard this before, the curse of knowledge, where you're so close to what you do, you know it so well, that it becomes this double-edged sword where you have a really hard time seeing it with a fresh perspective. And that wreaks havoc in many different places, but especially in marketing. So I noticed this instance of, you have this situation where you have this smart person who becomes an entrepreneur, they have a really good product, but they have this loyal circle of inner fans, but they have a hard time reaching new people because they're so close to it. And what I was able to do was go in, quickly understand what they're doing, because I'm a quick learner, and then say, oh no, we need to explain it like this. And so when we did that, we started getting really big results. And then that eventually translated into the book, which we can go into more depth on if you want.
Well, yeah, no, that's totally cool. And Tiago Forte, who has been on this show before, was either a client or somehow involved with the book. And we'll get into Tiago a little bit later, but those that have listened to prior episodes might recognize that name. So bringing us up to the present, kind of tell us, what are you doing today? Like, who are you continuing to help these small businesses with their messaging? Like, tell us kind of what you do now and kind of who you're for.
Yeah. So as the title of the book goes, Simple Marketing for Smart People, I like to call them smart people. So they are people who have domain expertise. So subject matter experts. Their products are typically online courses, coaching, consulting, service providers, even software. And not helping them with everything, but helping them with the one thing that I found to be the biggest needle mover, which is messaging. And what we're really doing is helping them solve that problem of the curse of knowledge, where they're just not seeing it with fresh eyes. And so we're helping them create messaging that meets the prospect where they are and instills the proper beliefs that the prospect needs in order to fully value that product or service that my client or student is selling.
Perfect. So let's dig in on this concept of beliefs. There's a lot of people listening right now who have different marketing backgrounds. Some have been lifetime marketers. Some are writers, copywriters, even like myself. And maybe for whatever reason, they don't really understand why beliefs are so important. We're going to get into depth on how to actually unravel this. But what do you want to say? What's the upside to once you grasp this thing, what it could unlock for marketers?
Yeah, and this was something I didn't realize when I started studying copywriting. And even today, like most copywriters don't actually know the discipline that they're employing when they do copywriting. And that's fine, because copywriters are so pragmatic and they're good at finding just what works. And they don't really necessarily need to go underneath the hood and figure out why it works. But I'm just naturally wired like that, right? So I dug. And what you find is there's a lot of copywriting advice out there that it's very low needle moving advice, where it's very stylistic advice. So it's things like, well, you write if we're being cynical, a clickbaity kind of a headline. But you could say things like use bullet points, good formatting, conversational tone, and all that. That's all very good advice. But at the end of the day, what you are really doing behind the scenes is you are making an argument. Not a heated road rage kind of an argument, I like that, but a rhetorical argument, what Aristotle taught over 2,000 years ago. And what it has to do with building belief in the mind of the prospect. So we ask this question, this is the question we ask in the book: what does my customer need to believe in order to buy? Kind of a provocative question. And it really is. But the beauty of it is that it's the antidote to that curse of knowledge. Because when you start to answer that question, you start to surface all these assumptions you were making about your prospect. And what you find is that things that you think that they believe and accept, they don't necessarily believe or accept. And without these beliefs, they're never going to fully value what you offer. They're not going to respond, even when you're giving them coupons for 20% off, 50% off. Has anyone ever done that? And you're like, well, I just gave you half off and you're still not buying. It's because they don't have the beliefs required to fully value and accept your offer. So that becomes our job, to build the belief.
Well, and the flip side of, if you are successful in what we're about to accomplish today, it does unlock more interest, more raving fans, more customers. Is that really what I'm hearing you say?
Absolutely. More customers, and also better customers too. Because you can get people through the door by using heavy-handed tactics and twisting arms. But I think your listeners would agree that you'd much rather have someone who's totally on board with your philosophy and your way of doing things, and you're just opening the door for them and letting them walk through.
I love it. So you talked about the curse of knowledge a couple times. So, and you also talked about smart marketers. You even have smart marketer or smart, people, entrepreneurs, whatever, inside the title of your book. So, explain why smart people, for whatever reason, get stuck in this curse of knowledge. Let's expand on it a little bit. What is it exactly? How do we even know we're suffering from it?
Yeah. So what happens is when you study a topic, it's very simple at first, but then it tends to diverge into multiplicity, into complexity. I'll give you an example. I like to use my beer example. So before I became a beer geek, beer was just beer to me. It was just one category. It was just beer. Then I started to learn more about it, and I learned that there are ales and there are lagers. And now, Michael, I could rattle off 150 styles of beer. There are that many in the world. I'm a certified beer judge, so I have to know all these different styles and rate them accordingly. And so if I go into a brewery with my friend and they just order a beer, like my mind is just racing. Like, what are you talking about? A beer? Are you talking about an IPA? Are you talking about a Pilsner? Are you talking about this? Right. So it's the same thing for your listeners, I'm sure, with your topic, where to you, it's not just one thing, it's many things. The problem is when you're trying to reach someone who doesn't have the knowledge that you have, and you come at them with all that multiplicity, all those details, all that complexity, they're going to get lost in the weeds. And so, what you need to do is, and you might think about this as dumb it down, but I hope the way I'm explaining it, you look at it differently. You need to simplify it. You need to bring those 150 beer styles into just beer. And when you meet the person where they are, even in doing that, because I expanded it right into the 150, you know that word beer, it's compressed. And that's a better way of thinking about it than dumbing it down. You want to compress your knowledge into something, a simple package that you can then unfold later on. And you do that unfolding through your marketing content. So it becomes a process of education, but you got to meet them with the simplicity first. And that's very hard for people who are extremely close to their topic.
Well, and fascinatingly enough, I have an example because I recently had my deck on my new house stained. Okay. So I just thought, all right, that's got to be pretty simple. There's just stain. What color is it? That's all there is to it. Then I began to realize, all right, well, what kind of stain? Do you want oil based? Do you want water based? Do you want like transparent? Do you want semi-transparent? Do you want opaque? And then what about all these other brands? And before you know it, my head exploded. Right. And it's like, but I ended up finding that in my particular case, I ended up getting educated in the process while I was shopping, right? And I would imagine this is how it is with anybody who's buying something for the first time that they've never had to do before. Like I've never had a deck where I had to have it stained. So I didn't know what I didn't know. And I would imagine if I put myself on the flip side of a painter, and I didn't even know I needed to go to painters, by the way, so I thought I didn't even know where to go. But I think if I put myself in the mind of the person who is the painter, then I would want to use language that's going to attract people that have decks for the first time and don't know anything about decks, right? And they don't know that they need oil versus water-based, and they don't know the pros and cons and all that kind of stuff, right? But I think what I'm hearing you say is many of us marketers assume our customers know all these different things. They know that you're supposed to use like, this kind of thing for this and that kind of thing for that. And I hear this a lot when I'm even talking to people inside my company, even my own conference. They take for granted that people know who Social Media Marketing World is, or even who Michael Stelzner is. And that stops, I think, us from actually accomplishing our mission, right?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. And when you speak to one of those people too, and it's a field you don't know about, like deck staining. And I went through that recently also. I was standing a picnic table that we bought. And same thing, right? Just completely overwhelmed. It was my first time doing it. And we know when we speak to someone like that, right? And they just dive right into the details and you just kind of nod your head and you're like, okay, like I'm trying to follow. And that's fine, right? If it's like a backyard barbecue or something, there's nothing on the line. But when you're selling something, when you're marketing something and you become that guy or gal and you start with the details, you're just losing them. So I don't know how many billions of dollars are lost every year due to the curse of knowledge, but it's very many.
Okay, so let's start with this presupposition that beliefs really matter, that's what we're talking about here today, right? And if we can get this really dialed in, it could have a massive impact on our business and our marketing and our lead generation and all the things. So where do we start? What's the very first thing we need to be thinking about when it comes to beliefs?
Yeah, so you want to start with the beliefs that your prospects currently hold. And so to back up for a sec, what is a belief? It's an acceptance that something is true. It's trust. It's faith. It's saying, okay, yes, I'm on board with that idea. And the problem becomes when you assume that they are on board with an idea, but they are not. And so what you need to do is figure out what they currently believe. And look, it's going to depend on who you're speaking with. And this is where knowing your audience and the channel you're communicating through is very important. So you're going to have, and maybe your listeners have experienced this, where they've come out with a product and have gotten some good sales right away. Like I see that we do a lot of online course launches, and someone will come out with a course and, oh, wow, like awesome. Like we did really well in this launch. And then the next one comes along and it's just crickets. And it's like, what happened there? You're seeing this process of belief building in action. You have this warm inner circle around you of people who have those required beliefs. They're on board. They've probably been following you for a while. You've been talking about this stuff, and it's not a very hard sell. You exhaust that pool of people pretty quickly. So what do you do? Well, obviously, and I love this quote by Peter Drucker, the famous management consultant. The goal of marketing is to make selling unnecessary.
Love it.
And so those people in that warm inner circle right around you don't really have to hard sell, right? But now you exhausted them. Okay, well then how do we get more people? How do we fill that inner circle again so it's just an easy sale again? Well, that's where marketing comes into play. That's the job of marketing, is to warm them up. And the way that you do that is by building belief, but that starts with first identifying what their current beliefs are.
How do we go about understanding what people's current beliefs are?
Well, it's not easy. I'm not going to pretend like marketing is easy. It's a challenging, I think it's the most, I've been in a lot of fields. I think it's the most challenging field, but it can be simple. And that's what the book is about. It doesn't need to be complex. And so we start with what their current beliefs are. And the best way to do it really is to speak with them.
Okay.
So I know that this isn't what we always want to hear. We want to send out surveys and things, and that all is well and good. But there's nothing like actually speaking to someone. So doing a customer call, a customer interview. And one thing that I like to listen for, because this is really more about listening than it is speaking when you're doing these conversations, is listen for the bad questions that they ask. And you might even call these stupid questions, but just don't tell them that, right? Because it takes a lot of courage to ask an expert about the field that they're in. And so hear these questions. And within the questions, you're going to hear these assumptions. So, for example, in the beer brewing business, I would get these questions. After a number of years, I knew what I was doing. I was entering competitions. I was judging beers. So I consider myself pretty experienced. I was teaching others. So now I had these newbies coming in, and they would ask things like, Billy, what strain of yeast should I use in my beer? Should I use one from Northern Belgium or Southern Belgium? And that is a good question for an advanced brewer who's really just trying to optimize their beer and, win the National Home Brewing Award. Fine question to ask. If you're a brand new brewer, because what I would find, I wouldn't answer that question right away, right? I'm like, well, hang on, let me ask you some more questions. And that's an important point, by the way. Sometimes by answering those bad questions, you're really doing a disservice to the person because you're validating that question and saying, oh yeah, that's a good question to ask. What you want to do is guide them to a better question. So I would follow up and ask them a few more questions. And then I would find out something like, oh, they're not properly cleaning and sanitizing their equipment, which is really critical in homebrewing because otherwise the beer goes sour. So there's a value hierarchy that people have. In the book, we call this the ladder of importance. So what they thought was important, the specific region of the world where their yeast strain comes from, was not very important. And the thing that I know to be important, cleaning and sanitizing your gear, was down here on the ladder, and it should have been up here. So your job then becomes, and we'll get more into this, is raising what you know to be important to the top of their value hierarchy. But listening for those bad questions is one way to identify their current beliefs.
So We also talked about myths and misperceptions and false beliefs, and maybe this is related, but let's talk a little bit about this, because I'm sure there's a lot of people listening from various different niches. Many of them might be consultants. Maybe they specialize in an area, for example, artificial intelligence. And maybe their prospects have this false belief that they don't need artificial intelligence. You know what I mean? Maybe that's just a bad presupposition. So what do we do? I mean, is that an example of a false belief or a myth or a misconception? I don't know. Let's talk about that a little bit.
The fact that in that example that you don't need AI.
Yeah.
That's a great example, because then this is what brings in the argumentation aspect. So then you need to make the argument that, hey, you do need AI, and you need to make certain claims and assertions around that. You need to back that up with evidence. But you also, I'm glad you used that one. Going back to this idea of you have this warm inner circle around you, and then people who are further away. We actually have a term for this that we call the chain of beliefs. And so the people who are closer to you, they're going to have a shorter chain of beliefs. So maybe in that example, like they're totally on board with AI. They're not going to question that it can help them. They believe it's the future. What they need to believe is that you are the person to teach it to them, if that's what the type of product is. So the beliefs that they need are more around, okay, is this person legit? Am I going to get my value for my money? If I want a refund, is that okay? People with the problem with that is it's a limited pool of people. The longer chain of beliefs people, they're going to be very resistant to AI. They're going to think, think about how far out you can go with that chain, right? Like there are some people who, no matter what, they will go into their grave not even touching AI. Now, if you go all the way out to that group of people and you have everyone in between that, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of customers. The problem is it's expensive. It's expensive in terms of your time and resources to educate the market. So you got to decide where you want to play your game. Do you want to go all the way out and try to preach to the truly unconverted, or somewhere more in the middle? And it's really a judgment call.
Okay, so I think I hear what you're saying. So in this first step, and I'm going to try to summarize what we've talked about. Tell me if I got this right. In the very first step here, we want to identify what people currently believe that we are trying to target. And let's include the things that we know are false, right? Beliefs. And let's identify the questions that they're likely asking that need to be reframed. But let's also identify the things that maybe are in alignment with what we believe. Is that right? Do we just come up with a list of like, the people that we're targeting likely believe these things, and some of these things are false and some of these things are true? Am I hearing that right?
Correct. Yeah. If you go through that list, I call it the 3 M's: the myths, the mistakes, the misconceptions. I'm sure everyone listening right now, you think about that. Ask yourself, what are the myths, the mistakes, and the misconceptions that my prospects have? I'm sure you could write a long list. And that is the perfect place to start.
Do we also want to identify the things that they believe that are not myths, mistakes, and misperceptions at this point?
Absolutely. Yeah. If there are things that they are on board with, those are good things to identify as well.
Okay, cool. So, all right, let's talk about the next step. Let's assume we've got a list. And by the way, how big should this list be? Are we talking like 100 things or 5 things, or what's your thoughts on this initial list of misperceptions and beliefs that are existing?
The way I approach it is write first, edit later.
Okay.
So I would do a big brain dump of this. Bring in people, by the way. If you have a team, bring in a team. If you have someone like front lines, like customer service or sales, perfect. Get them all down, and then start to edit, start to prioritize. And then over time, as you deploy this strategy, the cream will rise to the top. The ones that are most important will make themselves obvious.
Perfect. Okay. So we've got this list of beliefs that we know they have that are likely, misconceptions and all that fun stuff. What's the next step in your process of belief building?
Right. So we've identified the current beliefs that they have. Now we need to identify the beliefs that are required in order to buy your product. Another way you can ask this. So the question I posed earlier was, what does my customer need to believe in order to buy? You might also ask it like, what needs to be true for my offer to be a complete no-brainer? I like that phrasing of it. What needs to be true? And now we get into this idea of argumentation and developing a chain of logic. And really what we need to do here is then build the belief so that if that thing is false now, if they don't currently have that belief, now they do have it. Now it's true. So an example, to use our friend Tiago Forte, yeah, I've done a lot of work behind the scenes with him in building his business. He focuses on, his system is called Building a Second Brain. It's a productivity system that revolves around taking notes. So his people like to listen to podcasts like this. They read a lot of books and they take notes. Those notes go into what you call a second brain. And then you can use that second brain to produce creative works, your own podcasts, your own books, blog postings, businesses, things like that. Now, he was taking a lot for granted. He assumed that everyone was on board with note taking. Normal for him to assume that, right? He's been in this world for a decade. So the belief that we had to instill was note taking is important. Sounds very simple, sounds very basic, but think about it. If a prospect of his doesn't believe that note taking is important, does it matter the price of his course? Does it matter if he gives a big discount? They're going to hit this brick wall. So that became our job, and the job of our marketing content was to use argumentation to build that belief in the mind of his prospects that note taking is important.
So what exactly did that make possible for him when he started repositioning this concept of note taking is important? And I'll just say from my perspective, I think it's a filter, right? Because anybody who doesn't think it's important is going to move along. But expand on that a little bit more.
Right. So that becomes a claim that we make, right? A claim or an assertion. Note taking is important. I love that you said it's a filter, right? And that's the great thing about this. You make your argument for what you stand for, and people either buy it or they don't. But you don't want those people who aren't on board with your most basic philosophy. So what that turned into more social media subscribers. It turned into a very quickly growing email list, and ultimately allowed him to scale his business to 7 figures in just a couple of years.
Wow. So how do we identify the required beliefs? Let's talk about we at this point we've identified the section we talked about, which is the existing beliefs. But presumably these required beliefs are a subsegment of the existing beliefs or a Venn diagram overlap. I don't even know, but how do we actually identify what those required beliefs are?
Yeah, I struggled with this at first because I didn't have a very good framework for it. I think if any of us sit down and do this, you can start to rattle them off, and you might come up with a list of a dozen or so. I remember Tiago did this, and he's got a powerful brain. He had a list of 50 in just a few minutes, and I believe his list is like over 100 now.
Wow.
But I can help your listeners out and provide more of a structure to this. So what I realized was that a great structure for doing this is to map the beliefs to the customer journey. So we know the customer journey. It has the awareness stage. So this is where people are just becoming aware of you for the first time, and also not even aware of you, I should say, aware of their problem. Mm-hmm. After that, we have the consideration phase. So now they're aware of their problem, and they're considering different solutions out there. And it might be you in your category, but oftentimes, again, this is a curse of knowledge, and oftentimes the prospect is considering a solution that's a whole different category than yours. They think it'll lead them to the same place, the same end outcome, but it's very different than what you're offering. And you want to give voice to that. And then we have awareness, consideration, and then decision. So now they are aware of their problem. They are aware of the different solutions out there, pros and cons of these different solutions. Now they've zeroed in on specific providers like you and maybe your 2 closest competitors. Now they are deciding who to go with. And so now those beliefs need to be more around you, your reputation, your credibility, that you've helped people like that before. So those 3, is that helpful? Those 3 buckets are a good structure to ask that question within. What does my customer need to believe in order to buy?
Yeah. And I don't know if you're able to do this with Tiago's example of how these beliefs were at various stages. If not, maybe we could use you as an example, or even me as an example. Just because obviously it seems to me what you're saying is that people have different beliefs as they move down this funnel, right? And do you have an example, or can we use you as an example, or even me as an example, and just kind of help people understand the beliefs they might have at each of these 3 stages?
Let's keep running with Tiago, because I have a good story here where one of the first things that we did together, again, my background is in copywriting. So of course we start working together, and first thing I do is pull up his sales page for his course. And the headline was Building a Second Brain. That was the headline. So the name of his course, and a lot of people do it that way. But I would challenge you to take a different approach. And so what we did was we put in a headline that spoke to someone more in that awareness stage. So notice how that name of the course is in that final stage, right? The decision stage, because it's about him. So you're assuming so much by this point that they're now deciding between Tiago and someone else. So we made a headline that was related to the awareness stage. And it was, are you consuming a ton of interesting information, but feel like it's not leading to meaningful results in your life?
Love it. And let's pause there for a second. So that's a great example of a belief that people hold, which is that for whatever reason, they're a sponge when it comes to information, but they suck at actually extracting it and using it in their business or in their life. That's a belief, right? I mean, that's what I'm hearing you say. That's a legit problem that I think a lot of people are aware of. That's perfect. So really what I'm hearing you say is like, find that problem that that target audience might find interesting. Now, I'll tell you, I do have that problem, but I'm not sure I'm in the consideration stage. So I would love to know how you went from that problem ultimately to the next stage.
Right. So you need to, so that becomes then, to go back to our argumentation frame for this, that becomes a claim that we make. So we can flip that into a claim, which is you are consuming a lot of information and it's not leading to meaningful results in your life. And then what does a claim need? Well, we need to back it up with proof. We can't just say that. And so we show them like, hey, and there's all different ways that we can do this. We give you a bunch of different ways in the book using different forms of proof. One would be to just help them add up the hours that they've spent listening to podcasts, reading books, and all these things. So, we're not like twisting the knife, but we're making it very apparent to them, like a doctor would do, right? Like we tend to overlook things in our bodies, right? And then we go into the doctor and it's like, oh man, like he or she is going to be totally honest with me and maybe say something that I don't want to hear. But it's the thing that we need to hear in order to take action and improve ourselves.
I'm going to go ahead and just free flow a little bit here on how I think this might work if I was promoting one of our products, which is our conference, Social Media Marketing World. So I think people that are in the awareness stage would say that I need to learn better techniques, marketing techniques, so that I can increase my sales, my leads, and my exposure. That's a legit problem my audience is interested in. And I would even hypothesize they listen to this podcast for the very same reason. So that is something I know for a fact that is a belief that my audience faces. But then if I started to think about, all right, the broader audience that consumes all the media we produce as Social Media Examiner likely believes this and they love this stuff. But to jump to now, I actually want to go deeper. And I believe that I need something more, which I'm assuming might happen at the consideration phase. I think that's going to be a deeper belief, which is like something along the lines of, if I don't improve, my job could be on the line. I'm getting pressure from my customers, or I'm getting pressure from my boss to improve results, and I am struggling. Is that an example of a kind of belief that someone would have if they're willing to potentially spend thousands of dollars to get on an airplane and go to a conference in San Diego? Is that a good example of a problem that they believe to be true, or have I got this completely wrong?
Yes, and I like how you honed in on a specific avatar there, and I would imagine you guys have a big audience, you have multiple avatars, but that would be one, right? So that would be the person who is in the job, and you have another person who's going to be the solopreneur, and so that messaging wouldn't resonate with them. So if we're taking the person who's in the job, absolutely, yeah. So your claim in that case becomes something like, we like the term negative ripple effects for what you're talking about. There are negative ripple effects if you don't take action. This can happen. This can happen. This can happen. So absolutely.
And then ultimately the belief at the decision stage, I'm assuming at the decision stage, they believe that they need professional development, and they believe that going to conferences is going to help them with their professional development. And now it's just a question of which conference they go to. Is that an example of the kind of belief that might happen at this decision stage?
It could, yeah. I would actually move that one up to the consideration stage. And like, look, you might have some people who are the way I would approach it if I were you is I would even set aside the conference angle.
Mm.
What I would want is to have people totally sold on my approach, and then say, hey, the way that you can get access to this, the way that you can get help and support with this is through the conference.
I
Now
see.
you will likely have like I know personally, like I like going to conferences, so like that might sell me alone. So I'm not saying it's one or the other, but I would totally do this other way of doing it too, where and to back up a sec from the awareness stage into consideration, you were asking about how I want to make sure I bridge that gap between the two. I don't think I fully said it. What you want to do then, because you're assuming, look, you got to be targeting someone who wants a change. This is what Eugene Schwartz, the famous copywriter, said: is that you can't create demand, you can only channel it. So you want to be targeting someone who's looking to solve this problem. And so now what you want to do after awareness in the consideration stage is you want to acknowledge these other things that they're trying. You want to acknowledge these other bridges that they're taking or that they're being tempted by. You might ask yourself, who is advertising currently to my ideal customer? And what you don't want to do is just put the blinders on or plug your ears and pretend like those don't exist. What you want to do is give voice to those other options. And so again, we make an argument. We're not saying, hey, that competitor, they stink, right? That's not a very good argument. You want to say, hey, they focus on this, this, and this. We focus on this, this, and this. And we think that because of that, we're the better fit for you. And so that's how you get them on board with your approach, your philosophy, your formula. And then your conference or your online course or coaching program, whatever it is, just becomes the vehicle to deliver and implement that approach, if that makes sense.
Yep, I think it does. And we're going to dig a little bit deeper on this, but just to kind of bring people back to where we started this discussion. We started this discussion with what are the existing beliefs that my prospects have that may or may not be true. Then we talked about this second phase, which is what are the required beliefs that they need to have in order to become a customer, right? And now I think we've gotten into this third stage, right? Which is how do we actually build the beliefs, right? And I think I might have taken us down this trail a little bit here, but let's dig in on this third step. So if we know what the required beliefs are, how do we actually, I don't know. What do we do with that? I guess is the question.
Yeah. Well, and I want to reiterate for people what I said earlier and go back to this Peter Drucker quote, because it's really important to know what you are doing when you're doing marketing. I didn't realize this. I thought it was like hype and features and benefits. And like even that has a place. But what you're doing with your marketing content is you are making it easy for people to say yes when it comes time for you to make your offer. The goal of marketing is to make selling unnecessary or at least a heck of a lot easier. Okay. So with that in mind, then your marketing becomes educational because what you're doing is instilling these beliefs. So what you need to do is to make these claims like we've been outlining, like the claim that note taking is important. Okay. So someone might think notes, well, like I did that in high school and I had a really bad experience with that. Like now I'm a professional. How is this going to help me? Tiago can't take that for granted. So he needs to make that claim and then back it up with proof. And then the proof becomes your marketing content. And that was the big aha for me. In my opinion, if you're selling a product or service, it's different if you're running like an influencer type business model where you're selling advertising and all that. You're just trying to go viral. But the people I work with are selling a product or a service. And they're asking, well, what should my content be? Everyone's telling me to produce free content. My recommendation is that your free content should be the proof that instills these beliefs that your prospects need in order to buy.
So let's dig in on that a little bit. How do we create the kind of content, or what kinds of content should we create, maybe is the better question, that can help instill these beliefs? Like, are we talking about podcast interviews, or what are we talking about here exactly?
Yeah, and I would even think about that as a downstream decision. So the marketing channel that you use, so marketing channels, so podcasts, Facebook, SEO, Google Organic, bus benches, skywriting, right? These are all different distribution avenues for reaching our customer. And also the format. So is it text? Is it audio? Is it video? Set that aside. What you first want to do is figure out what is this proof that we're going to use and what does this basic content piece look like? I start with the proof, and my favorite framework for this. Again, I'm kind of old school. If you guys haven't gathered that, it goes back to Aristotle and the categories of ethos, pathos, and logos. So we can talk about that if you would like.
Yeah, I mean, go for it.
Yeah, so these are different means of persuasion, of influence. And so we can talk about pathos, which is it has to do with emotion. So we can use storytelling to get our point across, which is frankly my favorite way of doing it. I think, we can be persuaded by other things like logos. That's going to bring in logic. That's going to bring in data. That's going to bring in studies. But appealing to someone's emotions, telling a personal story about how you achieve something, that often goes a very long ways in persuading someone. So that's ethos. That's pathos. Logos, I mentioned. That's logic. That is reasoning. That is data. That's hard numbers. And then we have ethos, and that's going to be the character of the person. So that is going to be the credibility of the person. So you're more likely, if you're looking for advice around dental hygiene, you're going to listen to the doctor or the dentist before you are the mechanic.
Yeah, it's interesting because speaking of doctors, I just went to one yesterday because my allergies are acting up. And they gave me this little pamphlet that had all this description of all these things that I was allergic to. And in the back of the pamphlet, I realized it was sponsored by a company that was selling like pillowcases that are for people that have allergies, you know what I mean? And for mattress covers. And I ended up going and I ended up buying some of these pillowcases, right? But this is, I think, an example of, for me, the proof came because it came from the doctor. You know what I mean? Yeah. The doctor actually handed the darn thing out to me. And it had a lot of great educational content inside of it. I'm just curious, maybe we can give an example in the case of Tiago. How is he using content to help build beliefs from your perspective?
So he's a great storyteller, and he tells a story about it where he had an online course that he was preparing for that was coming up, a live course, but then he got a consulting opportunity from Toyota and some of their executives. They wanted him to come in and present, and it was a very last minute thing. So he's panicking, but because he had his second brain, which was full of notes that he had taken, it took virtually no time for him to put together his presentation, and he freaking wowed them, the Toyota executives. And so he tells that story, and his people, including myself, can relate to that story. And we're like, oh man, like I got a presentation tomorrow. I want a second brain. So that's a great example of using story as a form of proof to instill that belief that note taking is important.
I love it. Is there anything else that we should be thinking about when it comes to building beliefs beyond storytelling? I love storytelling. I'm a big fan of storytelling. That's why every guest at the top of the show gets a chance to share their story, because I think it helps establish a little of their background and a little bit of their reputation and expertise, if you will. But beyond that, is there any other way we can build belief outside of storytelling, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, those three categories will give you a good guide, and I encourage you readers to follow up with those, and they'll find some good examples within there. Again, ethos, pathos, logos. But another one that I like to use is demonstration. So give someone something that they can do that gets them just a small result. And so I have a good example for this. When I was doing the beer website, I had a beer tasting class, and so the idea is that for home beer brewers, it's important to have a honed in palate, because you can better critique your beer. Now, same thing with wine. The more you can taste what's in your wine, the better you can tweak your recipes. The problem was that a lot of my audience, they didn't believe that they could improve their palate. So their false belief was, oh, my tasting skills are locked in from birth, which is just not true. It's just not true. It's a skill that you can get better at. And I did this myself. I got better at it. But I can claim that all I want, right? But I need to prove it. And so this called for demonstration. So what I did was I gave him just a little technique, and I got a glass of water here, but your listeners can try this with beer or wine or their favorite spirit. And what most people do when they go to smell their beer is they give it a quick sniff. So they just go, right? Maybe quick sniffs. Most of what you taste actually comes from your sense of smell, comes from your nose. You only taste 4 or 5 basic things. There's thousands or millions of different things you can sense through your nose. And so what you do instead then is you do the long inhale. So instead of the quick sniff, sniff, you do, and just kind of slowly inhale, and you will notice so many more aromas.
Huh.
And so they do that. So I gave them that little exercise, and they're like, oh, wow, I guess I can improve my palate then.
Very fascinating. We have really kind of dug deep into why beliefs are so important, Billy. And if people want to discover more about you, first of all, what's the preferred social channel, if there is one, where they could reach out to you? Secondly, where can they discover more about you and your business if they want to, and or your book?
Yeah, so on social, I'm most active on Twitter or LinkedIn. So Billy Broas, Broas. You can find me on there. Please connect, say hi, and then go to simplemarketingbook.com, and then that's where you can find out where to buy the book.
Thank you, Billy, so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Michael. This was fun.